My name is Camila Rhodes. I'm 26 years old. And this is a true story that shattered everything I believed about love, family, and the dead. What happened to me can't be explained by logic, and even now I don't fully understand how I survived. But I'm sharing this because someone out there needs to know that family secrets, especially those buried in blood, don't stay hidden forever. Please make sure to subscribe, like, and share if you find this story compelling, and remember this story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries. It started the day I got the call that my grandmother had passed away. It wasn't unexpected. She was 92 and had been in hospice care for months, but the news hit me harder than I expected. Nona May wasn't just my grandmother. She had raised me when my parents died in a car crash when I was just 7. She lived in a secluded old house deep in the woods of Connecticut, far from anything resembling a neighborhood or community. The house itself was older than anything I'd ever seen built sometime in the 1800s, with creaky floors, a tower-like attic, and wallpaper that seemed to peel like it was shedding secrets. I hadn't visited her in nearly 4 years, not because I didn't want to, but because of the strange way she had pushed me away after I turned 22. She stopped calling, stopped writing, and when I tried to visit, she refused to come to the door. I later found out she placed a restraining order against outsiders, including me, claiming she was protecting the house. When she died, she left the house to me in her will. It was strange given how she cut me off, but the legal documents were clear. Camila Rhodes was now the sole owner of 312 Westcott Hill Road. When I drove up to the house for the first time in years, the moment my tires crunched over the gravel driveway, I felt this deep pressure in my chest, like something didn't want me there. The house looked even older than I remembered, like it had aged with grief. The windows were clouded as if no light had touched them in decades. Vines curled like fingers up the brick walls, and the front porch sagged like it was tired of holding secrets. I had planned to stay only for the weekend, just long enough to pack up valuables, meet with a lawyer, and put the house on the market. But the moment I stepped through the door, something inside me shifted. The air was thick, heavy, and even though the house was silent, it didn't feel empty that night. I stayed in my old childhood room, the one with the slanted ceiling and the small window that overlooked the forest. The bed still had my old purple comforter, and the shelves were dusty with forgotten books. At around 2:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of humming. It was faint but unmistakable, a lullaby, one I hadn't heard since I was a child. Nana May used to hum it when she rocked me to sleep. My skin broke into goosebumps as I sat up, trying to convince myself it was just the wind, but the tune grew louder, clearer, like it was echoing through the vents. I followed the sound barefoot across the icy wooden floor all the way to the hallway outside my room. The music stopped the moment I stepped into the hall. I turned to head back, only to find the attic door above me slightly open. That door had always been locked. Nana never let me go up there. I should have gone back to bed. I should have packed my things and left the next morning, but instead I climbed the narrow stairs up to the attic. The air was colder than it should have been in July, and the smell of old wood and something metallic hit my nose. As I reached the top, I noticed that the attic wasn't just a storage space, it was like a shrine. Dozens of black and white photos were pinned to the walls, all of different people, but they had one thing in common: every photo had its eyes scratched out. In the center of the attic stood an old rocking chair, slowly moving back and forth on its own. A book lay open on a dusty pedestal nearby, its pages handwritten in what looked like Latin. I turned to run, but just then the door slammed shut behind me. I was trapped. The rocking chair stopped, and for a full 10 seconds, everything went still. Then I heard a whisper right behind me, "You're not supposed to be here, Camila." I spun around, but no one was there. Only the photos, the book, and that cursed chair. My heart pounded as I clawed at the attic door, finally managing to force it open. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I called the lawyer and demanded answers. He hesitated before telling me that the house had a history, one that my grandmother had spent decades trying to erase. It was built by a man named Silas Westcott, who was rumored to have practiced dark rituals in the late 1800s. The house had been passed down for generations, each heir warned to never unlock the attic. My grandmother had apparently told him before she died that the house wasn't safe for anyone, but especially not for me. When I asked why, he said something that chilled me to my core. "She believed you were the key, that whatever was sealed in that attic had waited decades for you." I left the lawyer's office feeling sick, but I couldn't walk away. Something was pulling me back to that attic, to those photographs, to that whisper that knew my name. That night, I lit every light in the house and locked myself in my room. But locks didn't matter. At 2:17 a.m., the lullaby returned louder, closer. I covered my ears, trembling in the corner, and then I heard the voice again, only this time it wasn't a whisper. It was a scream my name shouted with rage and pain, Camila. The lights flickered, the air turned icy, and then silence. When I dared to open my eyes, I saw something written on the mirror in a condensation from my breath. 4 words, it's time to remember. The house wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it wanted something from me, something buried so deep in my bloodline that even I didn't know it existed. I didn't sleep at all that night. I just sat on the edge of the bed, watching the hallway through the cracked door, flinching at every creak in the floorboards. Morning came with no relief, only shadows that shifted in daylight, revealing claw marks down the hallway wall that hadn't been there before. I called out for Aunt Lorraine, but the house answered in silence. It wasn't until I went downstairs that I found her sitting stiffly at the kitchen table, her eyes bloodshot, staring into an untouched cup of tea. When I touched her shoulder, she jerked like she'd forgotten I existed. He came back, she whispered. He was standing outside my window last night. My skin prickled. Who? I asked. She just shook her head. Your grandfather, he was angry. He's never shown himself like that before. I wanted to scream. My grandfather died before I was born. How could he be back? You never told me about him, I said, voice shaking. You never told me anything. Aunt Lorraine looked at me with a pain I can't describe. Because no one was supposed to dig into the past, Camila. Your mother did, and she paid the price. Now you're paying too. I demanded the truth, sick of riddles and haunted whispers. Finally, she caved. Your grandfather, Edwin Rhodes, was the original owner of this house. He built it with his own hands, brick by brick, but he didn't just build a home, he built a trap. A place where the dead could linger, where their pain and anger would feed the walls. I stared at her like she'd lost her mind, but the darkness inside me knew she was telling the truth. He was obsessed with keeping the family together. She continued, so much so he started doing rituals, binding spirits. He thought he was creating a sanctuary, but all he did was imprison the angry, the vengeful, the murdered. My mother, she told me, tried to destroy the house, tried to burn it down. After finding his journals, but the fire never caught, the wood wouldn't burn. And 2 days later, she was found drowned in the bathtub, though there wasn't a drop of water on the floor. That was when Aunt Lorraine fled the house, locking it up for good until she brought me back. Why would you bring me here if you knew this place was cursed? I demanded. Because he started whispering again. Your grandfather, he told me if I didn't bring someone back, he'd take me. Instead, I'm sorry, Camila, I didn't want it to be you, but I couldn't die in this house. I backed away from her, slowly realizing I wasn't her niece anymore. I was her sacrifice. I ran out the door, down the path, heart pounding in my throat. But the road was gone. There was no driveway, no neighbors, just the thick forest creeping right up to the steps of the porch. I turned back and saw it. The house had changed. It wasn't the house I remembered walking into. It was darker, now older, pulsing with life like it had grown hungry and finally had someone to feed on. I tried to call for help, no signal. I banged on windows, kicked doors, but every time I circled around, I ended up right where I started. Trapped. Aunt Lorraine was waiting on the porch when I collapsed. You can't run from him, she said. He's part of you now. And that was when I realized something horrifying. She didn't just bring me here to save herself. She brought me here to replace her. She was passing the curse to me. You're the last Rhodes left, she said coldly. If you don't bind him, the house will rot and it'll take you with it. That night, I tried to stay awake, to watch the walls, the floors, the shadows, but I drifted off, and when I did, I dreamed of him, Edwin, tall, bone thin, eyes hollow like empty jars, and his voice sounded like nails against stone. Blood or bond, Camila, he whispered in my ear. Choose. I woke up choking on air, clawing at my own throat. The mirrors in the room were shattered. My clothes were soaked in blood, but it wasn't mine. I heard someone crying in the hall, and I followed it, tiptoeing with dread. The crying led to the basement door, the same one Aunt Lorraine had always locked. It was open now. I stepped down one creaking stair at a time into darkness so thick it felt alive. At the bottom I saw the truth, a wall covered in family portraits, dozens of faces all Rhodes, and in the center my own face freshly added. Below it, candles flickered in a strange pattern. Symbols drawn in chalk surrounded them. The air was suffocating. That was when Aunt Lorraine stepped behind me holding an old book. The ritual must be completed. Bind him or become him, she said. But I refused. I knocked the book from her hands and tried to destroy the altar, but the moment I touched it, a jolt of energy threw me across the room. My vision blurred. Edwin stood over me, not as a ghost, but as something more real than death. If you won't take the bond willingly, he growled, I'll take your body instead. His shadow crawled into me like smoke, seeping into my mouth, my nose, my skin. I screamed until my throat bled, and then I blacked out. When I woke, it was morning. The basement was gone. No altar, no candles. Aunt Lorraine was nowhere, but her voice echoed through the hallway. "It's done, Camila. You're the house now. Keep it fed." I looked in the mirror and it wasn't my face staring back. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old house sounded like a footstep. Every whisper of wind against the windows made my heart jump. I stayed in the guest bedroom with my back pressed against the wall, my eyes wide open, gripping the old cross I found in a drawer. By morning, I knew I had to confront the truth, no matter how deep it was buried. I went down to the basement where the air felt colder, like the walls held their breath for years. Behind a crumbling stack of firewood, I found a rusted door almost fused into the wall with age and mildew. When I pushed it open, the scent of rot and damp earth made me gag. It was a secret room, unfinished, lined with crude wooden shelves, and in the center stood a child's rocking chair, broken on one side. I turned on my flashlight and nearly dropped it when I saw the walls covered in old photos, dozens of them black and white portraits of people I didn't recognize, stern faces, wide eyes, and beneath each scribbled names and dates. I noticed one photograph half buried under dust that made my stomach turn. It was my mother as a child. She looked terrified. Her photo was marked with red ink across her eyes. I stumbled back and found an old box under the chair wrapped in a rotting quilt. Inside were a child's dress, a rusty hairbrush, and a diary belonging to a girl named Elsie. As I flipped through the pages, my hands trembled. The entries began innocently enough, like any young girl's journal, but slowly turned into please, cries for help. "Mommy doesn't believe me." One page read, "He comes at night. He says I'm special. He says I belong to him." My heart pounded harder. The last page read, "If someone reads this, know that the house eats the truth. It took me, it'll take them all." A sound upstairs startled me. Footsteps heavy and slow. I grabbed the diary and raced upstairs, only to find the living room empty, but the television on playing static. I turned to see the mirror on the wall, dripping with something thick and red. My reflection was missing that night. I left the house and stayed at a motel, trying to decide if I should run or burn the whole place down. But something in me, some fire or madness, refused to back down. The next day, I visited the town archives. I lied and said I was doing a genealogy project. An old clerk pulled the land records for the house and the surrounding area. That's when I saw it. The land had once belonged to a man named Elias Wren, my great-grandfather. There were sealed records about a missing girl from the 1940s. Elsie Wren, age 9, she vanished without a trace. No one was ever charged. The rumors hinted at ritualistic practices, even devil worship. I went deeper, uncovering pages about townspeople who had once stormed the house but were silenced their families, leaving town shortly after. And then the bombshell: I found a medical record with my mother's name on it, listed under a different alias, documenting a psychotic break after a near-death experience when she was 12. She was hospitalized for months and had memory loss about her childhood. The pieces started to come together. Whatever horror lived in that house had started generations ago, and it kept itself alive through silence. I drove back to the house, determined to speak to my mother. She refused at first, but when I showed her the diary, something shattered in her. She collapsed in tears and confessed something I'll never forget. She remembered being locked in that basement, hearing voices whisper her name, seeing shadows crawl across the walls. But the worst part? She remembered seeing a girl, Elsie, dressed in old clothes, face pale, eyes black. She said Elsie called her sister and said they were both his. My mother had blocked it out, told herself it was a nightmare, but deep down she knew something terrible had happened. "Your grandfather wasn't a good man," she said. "He believed in power through sacrifice, and he offered his own bloodline to something evil." My hands went cold. "Do you mean he offered you?" She nodded, eyes filled with shame. "He tried, but I ran. I escaped, and I never went back. She begged me to leave, to sell the house and never return. But I couldn't, not yet, not until I faced whatever was buried in that place that night." I returned with salt candles and the diary. I read Elsie's words aloud in the basement, declaring I wasn't afraid. The air turned icy. The candles flickered. And then she appeared, her outline first, then her face, not angry, not monstrous, just lost. She whispered, "He still lives here," and pointed toward the back wall. I turned, and a section of stone began to crack, revealing a passageway leading into pure darkness. As I stepped in, the air grew thicker, the ground uneven beneath my feet. I didn't know if I was walking into a physical tunnel or the mouth of something spiritual, but I knew this was the path to the truth, and I wasn't coming out without. I didn't sleep that night. Every minute felt like a slow march towards something inevitable, something grotesque waiting at the edge of my life. I sat on the old leather couch in the living room, surrounded by my father's research journals and creaking silence. The clock ticked louder than ever before. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was resolve. I would face whatever lived inside this house, whatever fed on our family's pain. My hands trembled as I read through the last few pages of my dad's diary, the ones I had ignored. That's when I found the word I'd never seen before, bloodbound. It wasn't just a curse, it was a pact made generations ago. Starting with my great-great-grandfather, Elijah Rhodes. He had performed a binding ritual sacrificing his own brother to ensure prosperity and protection for the Rhodes family, but the deal was never complete. The spirit of the sacrificed child had remained tethered, seeking balance, vengeance. My father had discovered this and tried to reverse it but failed, and in doing so reawakened the spirits. Rage that explained the growling voices, the faces in the mirrors, the violent night my uncle died, and why Mom was the next to be taken. I needed to end this, not just for myself, but for all those who were lost. The key was in the basement where the original ritual had taken place, with salt in one pocket, a lighter in the other, and a printed reversal ritual from my dad's notes clenched in my fist. I descended into the dark below. The smell was overwhelming now, burnt wood, rotting flesh, and something colder than ice. The basement wasn't just a room anymore. It had changed into a space between life and death. Shadows pulsed like veins on the wall. In the moment I stepped on the original ritual circle, I felt a surge of heat around my neck, like invisible hands choking me, but I kept chanting. Every Latin word burned in my throat like fire, and the spirit fought back. I saw at the boy, his eyes were hollow but endless, and in them I saw every death in my family replayed like a film strip. His death, my uncle's neck breaking, my mother's body floating, Dad's heart collapsing in his chest. I screamed the last word of the chant, and the candle flames burst upward. A blinding white light filled the room, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I was outside, lying on the wet lawn with the house behind me reduced to a smoldering skeleton. Fire trucks were arriving, sirens wailing in the distance. The townspeople said there had been an electrical explosion, but I knew the truth. The curse had finally been severed. I was free, but I would never be the same. The scars on my soul were permanent. I left that town 2 days later, taking only a box of family photos and my father's journals. I moved across the country, changed my name for a while, and tried to build a life again. But even now, sometimes I wake up at 3:33 a.m. Always the same time, with the feeling that someone is sitting at the edge of my bed, watching, waiting. Maybe the house is gone, but some doors, once open, never truly closed. To everyone listening, thank you for walking through this darkness with me. I hope my story helps someone else escape theirs. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to Dark Lifeside Diaries. Your support means everything. Thanks.